You are welcome to today's lecture under the use of English series for JAMB UTME. Of course, episode 16. Our topic for today is active and passive voice. Do not forget to enable landscape view on your device by tapping on the icon located at this place that I'm hovering my mouse to enjoy the maximum viewer experience. Without wasting much of our time, let's head straight into the lecture outline. Lecture outline. Definition of active and passive voices. Principles and examples of active and passive voices. Practice exercises from WAEC and JAMB/answers. Quick recap of the lecture. You will learn the above in this lecture and I wish you good luck. Active voice. What is an active voice? A sentence is said to be in an active voice if the subject is the performer of the action as well as the topic of discussion. So the sentence is said to be in active voice when the subject is the performer and is the subject of discussion, is the area of discussion in the sentence, is what the sentence is all about. The subject is what the sentence is all about. That's when a sentence is in the active voice. Let's look at the example we have here. The boy kicked the girl. The boy kicked the girl. Looking at the sentence, we have the performer, which is the subject. The boy is the performer, which is the subject. Remember, a sentence is said to be in an active voice when the performer of the sentence, which is the subject, is the main discussion of the sentence. So this sentence is talking about this boy, what this boy did to the girl. The topic of discussion is the boy, making it the performer, okay? So the subject is the performer. That makes it an active sentence, okay? Or that makes it a sentence in an active voice, okay? This is what an action, okay? Action, which is the verb, and the girl is the object. So the boy performed the action, which is kick. He kicked the girl. So the boy is the performer and it occupies the what? The subject position. So the performer is the subject position. That makes it an active voice. The performer of the action is in the subject position. Moving on. Passive voice in contrast. A sentence that is in the passive voice is one in which the object becomes the subject. So is an opposite of active voice. So the object turns to the subject. The ending of the sentence turns to the beginning of the sentence. That's a sentence in a passive voice. In other words, to further illustrate this definition, while the subject here is the topic of discussion, it is no longer the performer of the action in the sentence. The subject is the topic of discussion, yes, but since it's a passive voice, it's no longer the performer of the action in the sentence. The subject has been interchanged with the object, or the object has been interchanged with the subject. The subject now takes the subject position. Though in the passive voice, the subject is the topic of discussion, but it is no longer the performer. Just have it in your mind that the object turns to subject in a passive voice. Let's look at the example we have here. The girl was kicked by the boy. The girl here in this sentence is the subject. Was kicked. Look at kicked. The performed action or the action performed is kicked by the boy. The boy turned towards the object. The same sentence we use. The girl was kicked by the boy. The boy is no longer the performer of the action, but the sentence is talking about the boy. The topic of discussion is the boy, but it's no longer the performer. The performer here is not the girl, the performer of the action. The girl was kicked by the boy. Okay? The girl was kicked by the boy. Passive voice. An active voice, we say the boy kicked the girl. The performer is located on the subject position for active. Then for passive, the performer becomes the object and the object switches position with the subject. That's that for that. Moving on. The passive voice tends to shift emphasis from the performer of the action to the action that is performed and its recipient. The passive voice shifts the emphasis from the performer of the action to the action itself. For example, the lorry destroyed the gate. Active voice is active. The lorry is the performer located on the what? The subject position. The second example here says the gate was destroyed by the lorry. A passive voice because the gate now turned to the what? The subject. And the lorry is no longer the performer. It gives this performance to what? The verb, the action performed. And it turns to the subject, making this a passive voice. The object is no longer the object. The subject becomes the object becomes the subject. There is a change in position. That's what makes it passive. And mind you, the former performer loses its duty of being the performer of the action. And it gives that performance duty to the verb. In this case, destroyed is the verb. Moving on. More examples. The first one here is people grow rice in Kwara State. Active voice. People is the performer. People grow rice in Kwara State. Active. The next example, rice is grown by people in Kwara State. Passive. Because the people is no longer the performer. The people is no longer the performer again. So that turns this statement or this sentence to a passive voice. The next example, rice is grown in Kwara State. Passive voice. The people is no longer the performer here. Rice becomes the performer. And remember what made up the object position, rice. Rice switched position with the people, which was supposed to be here, making this a passive voice. Always remember, in a passive voice, there's a change in position between the subject and the object. But the active voice, the subject is the performer of the action. Moving on. Note something very important. When changing a sentence from active to passive voice, care should be taken so that the tense is maintained. It is important to maintain the tenses when you are converting a sentence in an active voice to a passive voice. Maintain the tenses. If you have not taken my lecture on tenses, do well to take that. The link is in the description. It says maintain the tenses. For example, active voice located on the left side of the table, while passive voice located on the right side of the table. Remember the color codings. Color coding of active voice in this lecture is red. The color coding of passive voice in this lecture is green. On the active voice portion, we have past tense. Let's look at the example we have under the past tense. Remember, it says maintain the tenses. Under the past tense, Mary cooked the rice. Can you see? Let's convert this active voice to passive voice. Remember, maintain the tense. Still under past tense, the rice was cooked by Miriam. The rice was cooked by Miriam. What is the tense? Cooked, past tense, cooked, tense maintained. The next example here is under the active voice, say, he said it. Simple active voice, said. Said is the tense, and said is what? Past tense. Let's convert it to a passive voice. It was said by him. The same tense, said, past tense of say. Moving on to the next examples. On the left-hand side of the table, we find the passive voice there. The tense there is present continuous tense. He is saying it. This is a simple present continuous tense. Let's convert this, he is saying it, to a passive voice. It is being said by him. Can you see the form of being used? B-E-I-N-G. It is being said by him. The same simple present continuous. Is saying, is being, ing form. Ing form. Is an ing form. Continuous tense. Tense maintained. Let's look at future perfect tense. Real. Future perfect tense. The first example here is he will have said it under the active voice. He will have said it. Let's convert this he will have said it to an active voice. It will have been said by him. It will have been said by him. The same tenses. Tenses maintained. Will have is the tense. Future perfect tense. Will have. Will have been. The same future perfect tense. Looking at the next example here under active voice, it says, Mary will have cooked the rice. Mary will have cooked the rice. Converting this to a passive voice, it says, the rice will have been cooked by Mary. Tense maintained. Future perfect tense. Will have. Future perfect tense here on the passive voice too. Will have. Always maintain the tenses when converting from active to passive voice. Moving on. More examples. Still under the future perfect tense. Under active voice, he would have said it. Converting it to a passive voice, it would have been said by him. Would have is the tense. Look at the passive voice. Would have is also there. Tense maintained. The next example here under the active voice says, I would have eaten the food. Active voice. I would have eaten the food. Active voice. In what tense? In future perfect tense. Converting this to a passive voice, it says, the food would have been eaten by me. Tense maintained. Would have. Future perfect tense. Looking at the next tense we have here, past continuous tense. Under the active voice, the first example there is, he was saying it. He was saying it. Converting this to a passive voice, it says, it was being said by him. It was being said by him. Tense maintained. Was is here. Ing form is also here. Being, ing form. Past continuous tense. Past. This represents the past. Was, continuous, being, ing form. Was here represents the past. Saying, ing form, continuous tense. Past continuous tense. Looking at the next example we have here under the active voice, still under past continuous tense. Mary was cooking the rice. Converting this to a passive voice, it says the rice was being cooked by Mary. Remember the tense. What is the tense? Past continuous tense. Past. Was is past. Continuous. Cooking. The ing form. Let's look at the passive that we converted. Rice was is here, and the being ing form, and not the en form. Tense maintained, which is what the past continuous tense. Moving on. More examples. Under the active voice, past perfect tense. On the left-hand side of the table, the tense is past perfect tense. The first example there is he had said it. Converting this to a passive voice, it reads, it had been said by him. Tense maintained. Had said. Had been. Had said. Past perfect tense. Past perfect tense. Had is a past perfect tense. Remember, we have said here as the past. The perfect tense is had. Remember, we have been. been and said here is a past tense. Then the had here is the perfect tense, tense maintained. The next we have here under the examples is the active voice says, Miriam had cooked the rice. Converting this to a passive voice, it says, the rice had been cooked by Miriam. Tense maintained. Had is a perfect tense. A perfect tense. Why B-E-E-N, the form, the E-N form of this being, and also this cooked ending in E-D makes this what? A past tense. So perfect. This one is the perfect. Had is the perfect. The B-E-N and cooked is the past tense. And looking at this side, the active voice, had is what? The perfect tense here. Why the cooked is the what? The past. Moving on to the next, still under active voice, the tense here is present perfect tense. And the first example here is, he has said it. Converting this to a passive voice, he says, it has been said by him. He has. The has here is the present perfect tense. Just a past tense with has. A past tense with has. If you have not taken my lecture on tenses, do well to take that to have a smoother understanding of this lecture. Looking at the right-hand side, which houses the passive voice, it says, it has been said by him. Has been is a what? A present perfect tense. Looking at the next example we have here, under the active voice, I have eaten the food. Converting it to the passive voice, it says, the food has been eaten by me. Has been, have eaten. If you have taken my lecture on tenses, the present perfect tense, the content is usually have/has. That's have or has slash a participle. Have/has plus a participle. So this here we are having the have form plus a participle. Here we are having the has form and a participle, which is eating, being eaten, tense maintained. Being eaten is the participle, tense maintained. With this, we have come to the end of the active and the passive voice. Let's take some exercises pertaining to this lecture. Exercises. This questions was brought from JAMB UTME 1999/2008. The instruction says, fill in the gap with the correct option. Number 1, by the time we arrived, the food dash. By the time we arrived, the food dash. A, has been served. B, had been served. C, was served. D, have been served. What's your answer? By the time we arrived, the food dash. You answered right. The correct option is B, had been served. By the time we arrived, the food had been served. Number 2, the students dashed the hall before the principal arrived. The students dashed the hall before the principal arrived. A, have cleaned. B, cleaned. C, had cleaned. D, were cleaned. What's your answer? The students dashed the hall before the principal arrived. You answered right. The correct option is C, had cleaned. The students had cleaned the hall before the principal arrived. Number 3, a new library dash in our school next term. A new library dash in our school next term. A, will be built. B, is building. C, has built. D, had built. What's your answer? A new library dash in our school next term. You answered right. The correct option is A, will be built. A new library will be built in our school next term. Number 4, the manager dashed the report before the meeting started. The manager dashed the report before the meeting started. A, has prepared. B, had prepared. C, prepared. D, was prepared. What's your answer? The manager dashed the report before the meeting started. You answered right. The correct option is B, had prepared. The manager had prepared the report before the meeting started. These are the answers. What did you score? A quick recap says, a sentence is said to be in an active voice if the subject is the performer of the action as well as the topic of discussion. The subject is the performer of the action as well as the topic of discussion. That's the active voice. Looking at the next we have here, a sentence that is in the passive voice is the one in which the object becomes the subject. Never you forget that. Note something very important here. When changing a sentence from active to passive voice, it is important to maintain its tense. Always maintain the tense of the sentence when converting from active to passive voice. Thank you so much for taking this lecture. Do not forget to subscribe and follow for more at Nkwado Augustine across all social media platforms. Do you have any question or knowledge gap? Do well to drop your questions and knowledge gap in the comments, and I will do justice to your questions and knowledge gap. At this point, I'm out.